Hello, welcome to the May 27th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you've not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're running. So if it is Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which operating system, so if you're running on Mac or PC. Also, if you could specify which version number, so if it's 12, 13, or 14, that information is helpful. And we also, we should have an index of all the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. And if several hours after the live stream ends with timestamps, you can navigate quickly to particular topics. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're not Steinberg employees. They just make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. We'll also give Jazz Dude a special kudos for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. And with that, so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of, in the United States, outside of Washington, D.C., in Alexandria, Virginia. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. One quick programming note. I have to, next Tuesday, I have to do a trip with my son with his class. So I'm going to be doing that. Let me know if you wanted to still do two live streams next week, whether it's going to be, maybe we move Tuesday's live stream to Monday or move it to Wednesday. Let me know what you think. And also, just a quick programming note, we will be having our Zoom meetup this Friday, so in 3 days. So we'll look forward to that, where we could actually meet with all the different people on Zoom. So it's a wonderful opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better and put faces to the names that you see in the chats. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, we see James Daly checking in from Vancouver, Mark Rabin. Checking in, his dog Stella is here. She's beckoning for a walk. Not sure how long that will last. Everyone give a big woof to Mark Raven's dog Stella. We see Terry Gray checking in from Minneapolis. We see Jan from Cubase Index from Stockholm. All right, Mark Rabin says, I do have a question. I've been having an issue with Groove Agent 5 license. I've used the activation manager. Deactivate, got the error again, restarted, seems to work. I've experienced this a lot lately. So make sure when you're doing the activation manager, so sometimes when you go to the activation manager, make sure that you're logged in with your credentials. So if you come right over here to the upper right hand corner, just make sure that when you're over here, so let's say, make sure that you are logged in and signed in with the activation manager. Sometimes that can get unlinked, and then you may run into some issues like you're describing. All right, and then kind of follow up to that. We see the Groove Agent 5 license not found error. Anyone else? I can see Groove Agent 5 content download fails, and I can't get it to complete. So make sure, when you come over to the Steinberg Download Assistant, so I'm not sure if it's the standalone Groove Agent. I'll assume it is. I think you have a license for standalone. I'll just cancel that for now. So let's say if we Come over here, check if you go to the settings tab here, if maybe you just change to a different download directory. So once you get to the Steinberg download assistant, try changing it to a different download location and then see if that makes a difference for the content showing up for you, Mark. All right, wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. We have the artist known as Love checking in. He wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, Gregory Malik says, Aloha. Is there a way in Cubase 14 to assign a keyboard shortcut to import a specific MIDI file to the current track without having the file selection dialog open? Same file all the time. So I don't think it's a keyboard shortcut, but let's say if I came over here and I'll export this as a MIDI file. So let's just come over here. Let's export this as a MIDI file, and I'll just put it to my desktop. Okay. So now let's come over, let's go to like our media bay, and we could say we want to go to, let's say, our file browser. Let's go to desktop. All right, and we're going to have let's see if I rescan the media bay here real quick. And I think we could just double click on the MIDI file. Let me just look for MIDI files. Okay, so let's just say I'll come over here, and as we look for MIDI files, so if I come and I have this particular track selected here and I double click on the MIDI file, so we can drag the MIDI file right there if you want. But I don't think that there's a key command to go directly to a MIDI file. But let's say if we double click here, we can load, but we can drag and drop MIDI files right into the particular project. So if we come here, I could just drag and drop the MIDI files right in. Like so. I don't know of a way to immediately load a MIDI file by a particular name, so you might have to just, and what you could do is come over here, and once you have this kind of set up, you could right click and add favorites. So we'll call this fave MIDI file. And then once you're in the media bay here, you could just say, let's go to favorites. We'll go to fave MIDI file, and then you could say, okay, let's just come right over here, and then we could just store that particular location as a preset so you can navigate there quickly. And thanks for joining us, Gregory. Great to see you. All right, James Daly asks, how should I set up a project before I move tracks from a folder into Cubase 14? Once I move them, from the recorder into an empty project, the track seems sped up. So it sounds like it could be a sample rate mismatch. So I would just kind of, as we want to, let's say if we have a new project here, come over, and I want to drag multiple files in. So I will just come here to my file browser. Let's go to Documents. We'll say Projects. All right, so let's say I go to my audio folder here. Now, sometimes when we go to, let's see if we can, but what you could do is just kind of come over and let's see if we could determine what sample rate is. So probably I would just come over here. Let's say if we drag all these files in, we'll put them into different tracks. All right, so we can see that our project is set to 44.1K, and if we select, when we select a file, we could see that this file is 44.1K. So if my project, let's say before I do that, and I set it up to an incorrect sample rate, I'll hit 48K here. So now when I drag files in, we can see that this is, the record format is set to 48K. So check just to make sure that after you import the files, if you select the files, you'll probably see, and you can see it also in the pool window. So if you hit Control or Command plus P, as you kind of scroll over, you'll realize that you can see the sample rate. So make sure that the sample rate is set to the same. Let's see if it's. And if we just kind of look at it, we just. So, but when you select the particular file, make sure that this sample rate of the selected clip is set to the same sample rate of your project. So probably it's just importing the files into the wrong sample rate. All right, we see Tim Weinheimer on from Mission Viejo. Thanks for joining us. We have Rick France checking in from the Pacific Northwest. Tony Trunzo from Australia. Thanks for joining us very, very early in the morning. Okay, so we see from PR, it says, hi Greg, for a game project, I need to create and auto-name dozens of hundreds of audio tracks in Cubase from an Excel sheet, keeping both order and naming convention. Any macro script tips, please? Pro 14. So this is something that Nuendo may be kind of more amenable to. So let's say if we go to Nuendo 14, because there's lots of game audio functionality in Nuendo that's not found in Cubase. But if we come over here, I'll show this to you. But now we could just come over here, we could import like the CSV markers, so you could export that from Excel, and then you could just simply import and CSV is comma separated value. So those markers, you could now import that directly from Excel. I don't think that's going to be in Cubase, and then we can name the markers. In a pinch, you could get the Nuendo trial version and get that to work. But yeah, there's no way to import directly the markers from Excel into Cubase, but you can in Nuendo. So if you go to Nuendo, you can now just come over here and import the CSV markers and then you could do the naming conventions based on the markers as they're exported. All right, so we see Remu says, hi from Germany. It's my first time watching. I hope as a beginner I could still get some insights. Looking forward to the stream. So thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you on many more live streams. All right. We see Jan from Cubase Index giving kudos to Jazz Dude for the Cubase Nation Discord. Mark Rabin says, Stella says a big woof to myself and all the Cubasers, and she loves us so much. All right, we see Vince as FlyV checking in from Winnipeg. We see Benny from Sweden. All right, we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Marvin Earl from Newport in Rhode Island. Just saying, what's up, Greg? So, thanks for joining us today. We have Uno Memento joining from Finland, where the sun is shining and it's getting warmer. All right, we have Cornell joining from the Netherlands. John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, so we see, hey Greg, I'm starting to customize Retrolog and pad shop sounds in Nuendo 14 and saving them as user presets. Where are they located on Mac, and how can I move them from my desktop to my laptop? All right, so we'll show you the trick. So we'll come over. So I think if you save it as if you go to edit menu and save the profile, that they'll be included. But if you want to just quickly copy those over, let's add quick instrument track. So let's say pad shop. All right, so let's say we'll save this as a preset here. So say preset. We'll call it Terry Gray. Okay, so now what I want to do, let's go to your media bay. So we'll go to the home. We want to go to user presets. We'll say, let's go to VST instrument presets, and we could specify these by the particular instrument, but we're going to select the preset that we just made, or one of our presets, right click and choose reveal in Finder, and then we could see that it's going to be showing up. We'll show you the path here. So we say Macintosh HD. I think you're on Mac, if memory serves, but you go to your user account, go to library, to audio presets, Steinberg Media Technologies, and then you can see Pad Shop, Retrolog here, and then you could just copy those user presets from your desktop to your laptop and vice versa. So once again, find the preset, go into your media bay, go to user presets, say VST instruments. Let's come over, right click, reveal in Finder, and then copy those particular presets from that same location to another computer to the same location. All right, we have Majid Almasi from Australia. Thanks for joining us very early. right, so we see Michael James is granted Jan 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream. All right, so we see Chris Higginson says, "Hi Greg, just set up new M4 Mac Studio, just most download successful, but cannot see Steinberg HSO or Olympus Choir elements and Hallian Sonic 7 licenses are activated. Many thanks. So let me know if you actually have, because Steinberg HSO and the Olympus Choir elements don't come with Hallian Sonic, but they are part of the license. You know, that they can be licensed separately, or they could actually be licensed as part of the Absolute collection. So let me know if you have, like, if you purchase them separately, or if they're also available to run as plugins for Dorico. So if you have Dorico, it could be licensed through Dorico. But it's not just the standard part of Hallian Sonic 7. So if you could let me know, if just to confirm, if you have like an Absolute collection, or if you have those particular licenses that you purchase separately, because they're not standard with Cubase. All right. All right, so we see from PR, it just asks, in a project with many events across dozens of hundreds of tracks, need to batch export each event with processing using track name plus correlative suffix. Any way to automate this tedious tasks? Pro 14. All right, so let's take a quick look. All right, so let's say if I came across here, I'm going to, now let's put some space in here. Okay, so let's say if we had processing on all of these particular tracks, and we just have kind of in-game work. We often work in kind of non-linear, so we have lots of different functions. So we go to your file menu. Let's go to, we want to select all the events. So I'm going to right click. We'll select all the events here. Go to your file menu to export. I should have. And then you'll see export selected events. At this, we could come over. So once we have all of the events selected here, we could choose whether we want them to be dry, what the channel settings, if you wanted to include the inserts, channel EQ, and the channel strip, or if you wanted the send effects or all of the effects, you could add a tail. You could also use a custom name. So we could come over here to naming schemes. So you say, okay, I want the name of the event. So let's say I dragged in the event name, let's say the project name, and I want to put a counter on. So you have different functions here, and now you could just simply export thousands of different events to a particular location, wherever you want the location to be set to, right here. So you could have different naming schemes, different processing schemes. So you could do that again for across multiple tracks, whatever you wanted to do. So, and clicking here on the naming schemes, you could choose if you wanted to do free text, which is where you could kind of type in anything that you want. So we could just say, okay, let's put our free text in, and our free text, we want it to say, so you could put different digits, separators, counters, all right there. So select all the events, go to File, Export, Selected Events, and then you could choose your naming and processing options that are included and where they want to be exported to. All right, so we see Rebel says, hi Greg, did get my question answered about changing my theme back to default color. I thought we did it on a previous live stream. Sorry if I missed it. But if we go to the settings, so if you go to the user, let's say my color schemes, and I've changed all of these color schemes. So let's say I have like a super white background. I want my cycle region to be very dark. I want the roller background of active cycle, I want to be green. And if I don't like these particular settings, so let's say if I come here, so if I don't like and I want to go back to the default settings, just come right here to your preferences or settings, and you could just say go to defaults and hit apply. Okay. So any of the preferences that you've set and changed, if you want to go back to the default values, just simply select the preferences and click on defaults. All right, so Neil Conway just says, "Another fine day in Oregon. Thanks for joining us today." See, Mark Ravens received 1 gallon of Texas Select chocolate ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, we see Bratman Studio. Rick's checking in from, he's going to doctor's appointment with his brother. That's really good of you to do. So, and he's watching the live stream, listening to it on his phone. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. Hope you're well. All right, Uno Memento just says, Greg, when I try to open Download Assistant, I get a message that the program needs to be updated. When I press the update button, I keep getting the message an error occurred during the update. What? So maybe if you just try, let's go to like your web browser, because I think we could just maybe get the latest version of the Steinberg Download Assistant. So just if you come here and maybe just download it directly from here, that way it's not updating from within the application, but this will allow you to just run the separate installation of the latest version. So sometimes there could be permissions issues on different operating systems that could cause what you described. So give that a try, just downloading it straight from the website. All right, wonderful to see Da Vinci Girl checking in. All right, GBSTR asks, and then my chat field just jumped. It says, in the welcome screen, I don't see any default templates on the recording section. How can I see them or install them back? So generally, so let's go to the hub. So we'll go to new project. So let's say if we don't see any of these, let's take a look in. Because I think if you right click, just check to, let's look in this path. And it may be different on Windows, but if you go to, if you make a template, you know, if you're on Mac OS, it could be, if you right click on, if you, I know you don't see any templates currently, but, and let's see if we come over here and set reveal and finder, if this is in a different, so this will show up in preferences. So if you want, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'd be happy to get the templates back. One other thing that you could do is, let's say if you start, I'll just open up Nuendo and hold down Alt-Control-Shift if you're on Windows, or Command-Option-Shift if you're on Mac OS right after starting. So to start, I'm going to hold those keys down. And I think I was still in Nuendo, so let me just... All right, so now when I start, so hold down Alt-Control-Shift or Command-Option-Shift. And then you'll get this function here, and you could choose to disable the program preferences. So, and if you disable the program preferences from there, that will get all the default templates to show back up. So you could try to disable the program preferences and see if the templates show up. If they don't, you can email me and tell me which operating system you have, and I could send the location, and I could send templates over to you to resolve that for you. All right, so we have, I think it's Alexander saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining. All right, and Alexander's question is how to make vinyl effects in Cubase. I mean, when the music is playing, the pitch effects like on old vinyl. Thanks. Okay. Okay, so I'll exit out Nuendo, just jump back to Cubase. Okay, so if we have a particular file that we want to kind of behave like analog tape, where when you slow the tape down, the pitch also changes. So we'll come over to activate this project, and it's one of the time stretching modes. So I will come here, and let's say I want to take this particular project. So I'm going to come over, and we see that we have our elastic, we see under algorithm here. And I want to switch this to elastic tape. So now when I come over, and let's say I slow down the recording. So I'll just kind of take off. I'll just change my tempo here. All right, so we'll do it from scratch here just so you can see it. Okay, so I'm just going to import a quick audio track. So again, I put it in tape mode, and then all I had to do is kind of slow down. All right, and I'm going to put this into musical mode. So now, so as we speed the tempo up, the pitch will change accordingly. Now there's another method that you could also use just as a quick plug-in if you wanted to come to inserts, and under the category of other, there's Loop Mash FX. So if you wanted to do like tape stop effects, so it doesn't necessarily like allow you to kind of draw in the amount. Or if you want to do different vocal chops, kind of. So you can kind of set your amount. So you could play around with some of those types of effects for vinyl, or if you just want to place it into musical mode and put it into tape, and then from there adjust the tempo down, and that will do like kind of very speed processing, very speed recording. All right. All right, so we have Sound Foundry Studios is watching from Canada, across from the Motor City home of Motown. So thanks for joining us. Never made it over to Windsor. All the times I've been to Canada, just never drove across the bridge. I should have. All right, so we see from Paul D. In the inspector, I see that I can adjust the MIDI input for the currently selected instrument. Is there a way to change it for a group of instruments all at once? Okay, so let's come over here. I'm just going to add, it just says, for example, they should all respond to a different keyboard. So I'll just add in like 3 pad shop tracks here. Okay, so we see pad shop, and they're all currently set to all MIDI inputs. I select the second one, all MIDI inputs, this one. So if I want these to go to a particular, hold down the Alt or Option key plus the Shift. So now I can say I want these all to come from directly from the UR24C port. So now we come, and each of the tracks is now set to the specific port it wants. So select all the tracks, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and then you could set the MIDI input accordingly for all tracks simultaneously. So if I want these all to go back to all MIDI inputs now, and that will work for many different functions and routings in the particular. Okay, so we see James Daly says I used a live track 8 recorder in our live sets. So I have 8 tracks recorded. How would I know what the sample rate is? So generally, as soon as the file is imported into Cubase, you'll see what the record format of the file is right here. So if my project is at 48K. We could see, I think you could see it from, let me just look, I thought you could always see it in a pool. So yeah, you see it in a pool in the info. We could, as soon as it's copied into the project under the info, you'll see the sample rate right here for the audio file. So as soon as it's dropped in, you could see what the audio, and you could probably see what it is on the live track recorder as well. So. See, it looks like Bratman was just in Moab in Utah going jeeping. Sounds like fun. All right, wonderful to see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. All right, so we see from Da Vinci Girl, let me clear my throat. Says Daniela here from Bochum, Germany, using Cubase Pro 12. Main DAW is a Fairlight on Windows 7 and VST3 is not possible. I use $130,000 Fairlight EVO hardware because of a vocal. I did need Melodyne, and let's see if it's continued. It's possible to connect Logic Pro with the Fairlight and synchronize all, and it's also possible with FL. I use testing version for the moment, so I could connect 3 DAWs and run all processes. All right. Yeah, it's a shame that your $130,000 Fairlight can't do VST3. All right. So, but if you wanted to synchronize, all you would have to do is send MIDI timecode out directly from your Fairlight to Cubase. You could also just come right here if you don't have, so you probably need some form of a synchronization card. So you would need probably, so if you wanted to synchronize audio, you're going to have a way to kind of resolve the clocks to each other so that the audio doesn't drift out of time, because MIDI timecode isn't going to be precise enough for that. One trick that you can do is if you have a sync input from your, on the Fairlight, and $130,000, I think you should have a sync input. I would create a stereo track in Cubase, and in the insert, I'm going to turn the volume down here. You could just say, I want, and if you have like an audio output, a spare audio output, you could go under Tools and just say SMPTE Generator. And at this point, when you hit play, you would just see this would automatically output the time code. This time code could be fed into the sync in of your Fairlight if it has a sync. But basically, if you're synchronizing other DAWs, you would synchronize the same way. If you're sending like MTC from, MIDI timecode from your Fairlight, you would just go to your transport and go to your project synchronization setup. You want to say, we want to sources, we want this to resolve to MIDI timecode. You can have it automatically detect frame rate changes. And you need to come over here to your studio if you find edge drifting, because you'll need to resolve the audio clocks between the two systems. You'll need to select your audio system here, and I don't have an external clock source on mine, and define where the clock is connected to your Fairlight. So whether it's going to be over like an ADAT light pipe, if it's going to be over BNC word clock to your audio interface, you could do that, but it would synchronize the same way as other DAWs would. But to synchronize any other DAW with audio, then you should probably make sure that you have the right hardware, this right synchronization hardware, so that the two clocks run in sync. Otherwise, you're kind of in sync, but not. So I guess that's not in sync. All right. All right, we see Michael Teams is granted remove 1 gallon of banana nut fudge ice cream. All right, we see Terry Gray says, thanks, Greg. Yeah. All right, so we see further comment from DaVinci Girl says synchron, but with Cubase Pro, I could not connect and synchronize. How to connect Cubase with other DAWs, synchronize, that it works with hardware controlled mixer. So, if you're feeding out, time code or clock from, and this is in scenarios like this is why you have like a house clock and something like, like in the old days, people would run Aardvark for clock distribution or an Apogee Big Ben, and then they would just simply take that one clock and send it to all the different devices. So, but let us know what hardware synchronizer you have, because Cubase will work kind of the same way. So, but generally, MIDI timecode isn't going to be precise enough for proper synchronization because the audio clocks aren't resolving to each other. And that would be with any DAW. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl says Chris Blythe, the U.S. film director, made a video synchronization process, but just with Logic on his MacBook. So yeah, it really depends. Again, like synchronization is much easier if it's just MIDI, but if you're dealing with audio, that's when it could be a bit more complex. But if I thought I saw an email from you. Daniela, let me just see if it has like the link. I'd be happy to look at the link for you. Let me just see if it's in the email. Okay, so I think you sent the video. I'd be happy. I'll take a look at it and email you back right after the live stream. All right, so we see Chris Higginson says, hi, Greg. Steinberg HSO and Olympus Choir Elements were purchased as separate licenses. So if you purchase them as separate licenses, try going into, make sure on your new M4 that when you go to the Steinberg Download Assistant, you could see if you go to the Activation Manager, so, make sure that when you come here to, if you go to All Products and you say, let's go to VST Instruments and Plugins, make sure that you have like if we come over here to the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra, that you have this installed. So make sure you see that and the Olympus Choir Elements. Also make sure, I think because the HSO used to also work on e-licensor, so make sure that and see if you go into the Steinberg Activation Manager. And I don't remember from the previous question, but if you go to the Activation Manager, make sure that if you see it activated here, because when you go to a new machine, you may have to go to the not activated and just come over here. And if you see on my new machine, I installed it, but maybe the license isn't activated. So see if you see it on the not activated licenses, and then you could just click on activate. And at that point, see if they show up there. So let me know if you see it in the Activation Manager and what its status is, and let me know if it's downloaded and installed on your new M4 Mac. All right. All right, so we see Rudy Vissenberg says, Greg, I sent you a file after a previous Cubase live stream and never got a response. Will I get one? If you could remind me what the file was, sometimes I will respond to it in the live stream and not in the email. But if you could send that again, I'll keep my eyes out for it. Sorry about that. All right, Powell Juma asks, hi everyone, a weird problem in Cubase Pro 14. Every time I press play, all clips from the highlighted track are selected. Don't know how to come back to usual behavior. So let's say if we're doing this, let's say if I cut this event up here multiple times, there is a preference that may select the particular event. So for here, try going to your preferences or settings. And I think it's under maybe editing. Auto select events under cursor. So look at this preference if that's checked, because what that preference will do is to come here and as we're playing, the selected track here, that event will automatically get selected as soon as the cursor is over it. So if it's doing something like that, try again, go to settings. Let's go to editing and auto select events under cursor. See if that is maybe the behavior that you're seeing. All right, we see from PR just says, thank you so much for answering my questions. All right, my chat field jumped. Let me just catch up. All right, you see Terry Gray just says I bought Etude piano library over the long weekend and I haven't stopped playing it. Thank you, Steinberg. It's fantastic. Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful instrument, and I think that Steinberg had gotten this like a mechanical tool, because one of the hard things with doing like piano libraries is having the consistency of like a sampling session of being able to hit the velocity consistently across all the different piano notes. So if you have a human doing it, you have to have like a really good concert pianist to get that level of consistency if you're doing like 12 different velocity layers on each key. So I think they actually, I know with I think with Verve, they had gotten a tool that they could actually mechanically hit the key with the same pressure and the same velocity response every single time. So that as they were doing like sampling across different instruments, that it can be incredibly consistent that way. So it might have been used on Etude, but I think it's a wonderful library. So my kudos to Sebastian for his great work on, I think I mentioned on Facebook, of coming up with an instrument that's so incredibly easy to fit into your song without tweaking a lot of stuff. All right, so we see Sable Winters on. All right, Studio Mario G. Serrani says, hello, I have two questions. What is the best way to use Iconicus sections and players? Use expression maps or creating one track for every articulation? So I think using one track for every articulation was kind of the method that people used prior to expression maps. And I think once expression maps kind of came out, that became kind of the preferred method of working with it. So if we come over here, okay, so with the expression maps, let's say if we come over here and I'll just come over here. Let's go to our expression maps for the instrument. We'll choose our articulations and dynamics here. So I think it's much more elegant to be able to come here within the editor, because you have like one cello part often or one instrument part. So why have 12 instruments, especially if you're going to be doing scoring? So let's make this the active project here. So I think it's much easier just to come here and say, okay, I want these notes to be pizzicato coming up here, or tremolo, or legato on the long notes. And I think that if you worked with everything on separate tracks, that you wouldn't be as creative in auditioning and trying new parts. So I think instead of having like 6 different parts that make up one instrument, that you could have one track and switch all the instruments that way. And that's kind of why there's simple key switches to do that. And we have just another question. It says, what's the advantage of audio versus MIDI? So they're kind of two separate elements. So with MIDI, MIDI information sends this, we'll have a note that says it's on this pitch. It was pressed down this hard. It lasted this long and then was released. Now this instrument, we could switch it from a cello to a harp to a synthesizer to a piano sound, because MIDI itself doesn't have a particular sound. It's just a note on, note off message, and then you could send that to to any instrument. Whereas audio, you're actually capturing the audio, and you can't as easily say, okay, I want to change that cello recording to a French horn. You can't really do that as effectively. So depending on what you're doing, if you're capturing real musicians, like if you're recording a brass quintet, you'd record it as audio, because there's generally not a MIDI information coming from the brass quintet. So they're kind of different entities. So, but if you could specify in which context That could probably help you a little further. We see Studio Mario G. Serranis checking in from Puerto Rico. Thanks for joining us. Been there, I guess, twice. All right, Best Green Jesus is lurking but gave a big thumb up to say hello in his passive-aggressive way. Glad you're here. All right, so we have from Double Bass just asking if can you show the audio settings. All right, so I guess it's going to be in a studio setup. So if we get to audio system here, this will be my audio settings that I have here. Let me know if that is helpful for you. All right, so we see, is it possible to color multiple channels at once in the mixer? All right, so let's take a look. I think we could do it. Okay, so I'm going to just select multiple channels here. Let's put on Q-Link. We may need to do that. And so I want these all to be, we may have to do it inside of the project window. So if we do the project window here, I can change the color. So if we do it from, I know it's not the mix console, but if we have those selected, I can come over. Okay, so I want to just select the tracks here. So I can colorize them there. Let me just see. Trying the mixer one more time, make sure I don't have any events selected. Yeah, so it looks like the coloring in the mixer is still limited to 1. But we could probably, let's say if I come here, I want to take selected channels. We could probably use a project logical editor. It looks like that doesn't work if it's not the project window. So it looks like you might have to just select the particular tracks here and then just change the colors, and then the mixer colors will automatically reflect. All right, so you see DaVinci Girl just says, Greg, I did send you an email to answer my question and give you a link how easy it is to connect 2 DAWs in different systems, but Cubase I did not find out how to do. So Danielle, if it would help if you could tell me what synchronization hardware that you have. So, you know, Cubase, so you could have MIDI timecode coming in from generally when people synchronize 2 DAWs. If there's audio involved, you're going to have MIDI timecode. So, and then we go here to the project synchronization setup. We say, where do we want the MIDI timecode coming in from? So we would choose our destination where MIDI timecode is coming in. So MIDI timecode is coming out from the other DAW. It's coming in here. And then all we do is tell Cubase from the transport to activate external sync. And Cubase will sit there and wait till it's seeing MIDI timecode coming in. It's pretty standard with any DAW. And then we'll synchronize. Now, if you're doing audio, we need to also synchronize not only the MIDI information, which is very kind of imprecise in terms of it's a very coarse, low resolution compared to the audio clock. So if you go to your audio connections, you would need to take a digital connection that carries clocking, whether it's an ADAT light pipe, a SPDIF, ASEBU, a BNC word clock, And we would need to go to your studio setup, and you need to select your audio interface and tell it where, and we want it to be externally clocked, and tell where that clock is coming from so that the clocks between the two devices are synchronized. And that's pretty standard. That's how you set up external sync in Cubase. It's a pretty standard procedure with any DAW. But if you could specify which hardware you currently have to synchronize, that would be helpful as well. All right, so we see double bass says why plugins in real time 100% do not work. So make sure if you're not hearing plugins like as you're recording in real time, it could be that you have the constrained delay compensation activated here in the lower left-hand corner, and this would bypass plugins that have high latency so that you could track. So if I come over here and I don't see like these plugins available, it's like they're not working. Try to go to the lower left-hand corner of the transport and just turn off constrained delay compensation. So let me know if that's kind of what you're running into. All right, so we have Gom just saying namaste from India. Thanks for joining us. Alti and Lee, hi from Austria. Thanks for joining us. How about running a Nuendo 14 project using a MacBook Pro M2 and an external USB 3.2 SSD? Any drawbacks? So there's really, if you have enough hard drive space, you may have better throughput, on an internal drive versus kind of buffering through USB. Unless you're doing if you're doing like 300 tracks of audio, then the USB might not be the most ideal solution. But I think with kind of most normal projects, depending on your track count, that you'd probably be fine. And next question says, what is the fastest way to save, archive a project on an external location? So the best way to do that is just to come here and go to your file to backup project. Okay, so now when you come over here, you want to define a new folder. We'll get asked if you want to give it a project name. You could keep the current project active. You can minimize audio files, which is like if you use 3 seconds of a 2-minute audio recording, you don't have to back up the minute and 57 seconds you did not use. And you can remove unused files. So again, just to do that, come over here to File, to Backup Project. And thanks for joining us on the live stream today. All right, so we see more clarification from DaVinci Girl. Says, I have a sync hardware, but did not use it to sync the transport. I have Time Express from Motu. All right, so, how do you have the Motu connected to your Fairlight or to Cubase? Because you're going to need 2 pieces of hardware. One that's going to, depending on your Fairlight, how are you getting the time code out of the Fairlight to the other DAW? So if you're using the Motu MIDI time, it's like the MIDI timepiece, that could send it out, but you can't use the same box to send it to receive and sync another DAW. So you're probably going to need, something that generates time code and something that captures the time code. And you can't be the same device for sending and receiving. So So let us know how you're getting the time code out of your Fairlight into the other DAW. And if you're using the Motu Time Express on your DAW or the Fairlight. Great. All right, so we see from GOM, it says if we import audio from video files, sometimes it loads up. The majority of times it doesn't, and it doesn't show up in the pool as well. Same goes for the video file. So make sure that when you're doing it that, if it's something like a cell phone video, realize that those can have variable frame rates. So that, when not much is happening, it may do 4 frames per second, or it may do 30 frames a second, 25 frames per second. But a lot of cell phone video doesn't have a steady frame rate to make the file sizes smaller and easier to text and to share. So make sure that the video file that you have has a steady frame rate, and you may want to just make sure that as you're working with it, that, you could use a utility often just to verify. A lot of people use a utility called Handbrake, and that could take your video file in one format and convert it to other formats that people can use for editing purposes. You see Terry Gray just saying that he works at a broadcast facility. I think it's in PBS in Minneapolis. It says that they use a hardware synchronizer. It says it sends house clock, as Greg said, to every computer at the plant. It could be in sync if needed. All right, so we see another question from GOM. It says, what's the best way of setting up a template without having an audio file missing, even when I've not moved any files? Okay, so if you just kind of erase the files, so let's say I come here and I select all the files in my project. Let's say I select all the events, I hit delete, they're deleted, but they are still referenced in the pool window. So they may be deleted, and a lot of them may show up in the trash can. Okay, but they're still referenced within the particular file. So if you wanted to now at this point come over and say, remove unused media. So if you just say remove unused media and save as a template, you could do that as well. Another method might be to just come over and let's say, okay, I want to do just open up my hub here. But if we come over and we say import tracks from project. Okay, so let's say I want to take a particular project, so I'm going to come over all right, and I'm going to, right here where it says track data to be imported, I'm going to uncheck events and parts. So now that I do that, let me just see if I... Okay, so again, import tracks from project, uncheck events and parts. And then once you do that, save that as your template. So if you save the template with audio files in it, At that point, those files will automatically be always recalled. So you could choose to delete the files and remove the unused files before saving the template, or you could just simply come over and import the tracks from the project. And when you do that, import tracks from project. So say new project. Sorry if I went to the wrong thing again. Okay, so I'm going to select all of the events and not the events and parts. So now we save this as a template, and there's no media that is associated with this because we didn't import any of the files. So when we come over here to our pool window, we can see there's no files in this, so it's a clean project. But if you erased the files and didn't remove them as a reference, then anytime you start with the template, it's going to automatically look for those particular files. All right, so we see Raw Justice Hip Hop says checking in from Capitol Heights, Maryland. The holiday got him a day behind. So hope you had a great holiday. Good, nice weather here in DC area for the holiday. All right, so we see from Gomes says how to set up mastering chains using track presets for a project. All right, so let's say if I want to come over. Okay, so I'll come over here. So I'll come over here to my mix console. I will hide my input channels here. So I'm going to go here to my master. So we see our input output channels here. I'm going to open this. Go to, let's say, media. So let's come over here to presets, track presets, audio, and we could just kind of come right over here and say mastering. And we could just drag and drop these. So just drag our presets over. There's a number of mastering presets. And even if you have kind of a country piece, try something with a different genre. Let's try an EDM preset. So you get a sense of it. So again, come over to your, go to presets, track presets, audio, and then if you just kind of type in mastering, you could see a bunch of track presets and just drag and drop. And if we watch the inserts here, when we drag and drop, that will automatically update those particular plugin chains and the track preset for that track. All right, so we have NTX Uv, Music Studio says, I wish I had time to follow you every time from USA, Minnesota. So you could always watch the replays, so they're always available to watch afterwards as well. All right, we see Terry Gray just wondering, says, wondering what part of the state he's in because he's in Minneapolis. All right, so we see Val checking in from Vienna. All right, and we see the VWJ Music Studio, NTXU VWJ Music Studios in Rochester. So I think that's roughly in, not too far from Minneapolis. All right. All right, so Val is asking, can we have the recording we are doing, like the event clip, have a same recording red as the track section? Okay, so let's say if we want to record and so I guess you want this to be kind of red as it's recording. So this so it looks like that turns red as it's recording. I'll punch it out. So as soon as I punch in, by default, you see that the track, the same red recording red. Okay, so let me reread this. Can we have the recording we are doing, like the red event clip, have the same red recording red as the track section? Oh, so you want this event here. So I don't think that there is a setting for that. Let me just... Yeah, I don't think that there is a setting for that. So it's gonna, this will kind of maintain the track colors, and you see like what's red here. And I can see where some people may get upset if their track colors that they meticulously set up and defined change when they're recording. So someone would have an OCD moment about that, changing their predefined track colors. All right, so we see Balsa checking in from Montenegro. Thanks. All right, we see Randy from Radar, the band. All right. Okay. All right, so you see Da Vinci Girl says it has Mode 2 Time Machine and the Deity Quartz synchronized time code. Let me just look what the Deity Quartz is, see if I can find. All right, so I'm just looking at the Deity Quartz. So I'm not sure if that just writes time code. Looks like it's part of a microphone. Maybe it's writing time of day. So yeah, maybe Danielle, if you could send the model number of your deity chord. So I'm not sure if it's just like I know like some. So I'm just seeing it as a microphone. I'm looking at timecode setup guide. Just looking at this. Yeah, so if you could let me know like which exact model and if which is connected to your Cubase versus which is connected to your Fairlight, that would be helpful for me. All right, so we see from Chris Higginson says, "Hi Greg, regarding the Steinberg HSO and Olympus Choir, checked what you suggested. All seems to be in order. Don't want to waste too much time for everyone. Could I take some screenshots and email you?" So yeah, please email screenshots at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'd be happy to look at it for you. And you know, sometimes reinstalling can't hurt as well. And make sure that you're looking for them inside of Hallian Sonic or Hallian. So if we come here, you go to the instrument track, and let's say we choose Hallian Sonic. So early versions of HSO were kind of a standalone, and then it had migrated into using kind of the sounds inside of Hallian Sonic. So if you have the license, it should show up inside of Hallian Sonic or Hallian. And if we wanted to come over here to, I think I have the Olympus Choir elements, maybe not. I could install that, but you could, at this point, just, make sure that you're loading them directly from inside of like Hallian Sonic as well. All right, so we see from FlyV says, how do I clarify that my audio interface is recording 48K? So, it's usually kind of, you'll see it kind of in the audio interface settings. But let's say if you go to the control panel, often, let's see if it's, most audio interfaces will follow the DAW and will clock based on the DAW. You could try to record audio in, and as you record audio in, see if it's like the same pitch and something like that. It's good to maybe do like a test tone and record. Take the output of your audio interface, and have a test tone that's just a single tone, and then you could see if the pitch changes. But generally, like as you look at the audio file that's being captured here, and if you go to the pool window, look under the info, and then you could see the sample rate right here under the info section that's been captured in the audio file. All right, so we have Dennis Curran, who's also from Woodbury, who lives where Terry Gray is as well. They're both in Woodbury, Minnesota. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, just read. All right, so we just see kind of further clarification from DaVinci Girl. Just says, I see Terry Gray says your Motu should work if set up the way Greg described. And I see from DaVinci Girl it just says to the Fairlight. So I'm not sure if the Motu is connected to the Fairlight. All right. So we see from Witty Music says in the pool there's a noticeable click when you audition an audio file, Mac M1, Ultra 128 gigabytes RAM on NVMe. Is this a known problem? Makes sound effects and dialogue audition really challenging. 512 buffer. All right, so let's go ahead and give it a try. So just come over here. Let's open our pool window. Some of these may have space at the beginning.
Right after that Garth Brooks show, it was a long, long time ago.
So I'm not hearing any clicks here. I'll just turn it up so you could hear it a little louder.
There was no regret right after that. Are married with kids. We met alone. King lot waiting on our. It was 7th grade in the school park.
So I'm not getting any clicks or pops, and I didn't notice it when I had an M1. It's currently on an M4 MacBook Pro. So be curious if, depending on your audio interface, if you switch to a different driver, like even the built-in audio, if you get the same results, and make sure that the audio interface isn't, will take a second if it's set to the wrong sample rate, and it may take just like a second for it to say, oh, I'm playing at the wrong sample rate, let me switch, let me go back to the incorrect sample rate and go back and back. So sometimes when you're playing and there's a delay, it could be that the audio interface is switching sample rates. So try with like the built-in audio and see if you get the same results, but it doesn't seem to be doing it for me here. Okay. All right, so you see DaVinci Girl just says, to Logic, the synchronization was done automatic with the Fairlight, but this did not work with Cubase. So it's really kind of, synchronization between the DAWs works the same way, so I'm not sure what would be different. That would be automatic. And again, if you could tell us how the sync is getting out of your Fairlight and how it's getting into your DAW. And which hardware is outputting the time code, which hardware is kind of ingesting or capturing the time code. All right, let me see if I could just watch this video real quick on my phone. That Danielle has sent. Skip through the ads here. Okay, so I'm just going to watch this video real quick here. Let me see if I can get to the synchronization part. All right, so I'm just going to watch this. All right, so I'm just saying transport control with the jog shuttle wheel, but it's not synchronization. All right. So in this case, it looks like he's just using MIDI timecode as we described. So if you could specify, your MIDI timecode hardware in and out. All right. All right, so we see from Junior Rivero, high issue here. MIDI files don't show up for certain folders via any of the browser's Media Bay, Loop, and Sound browsers, including file browsers and Media tab. On right, thanks. All media types are checked. All right, so make sure so it's not going to show up in media. MIDI files aren't going to show up in like when we go to like the Loop browser or Sound browser. Those are just going to be sound. So we can go to like the Media Bay here. We will just say, okay, let's go to we'll go to loops and samples, or let's say I just want to go to my file browser here, and then we could see, okay, I want to go to desktop, and then we'll see like this little icon here for MIDI. When we see this icon right here that looks like a 5-pin DIN MIDI cable, we could, so all of mine are kind of showing up as expected right there. So, and if we go to like the full Media Bay, so again, like the Sound and Loop browser, and if we say I only want to see MIDI files, And we can say, let's go to this computer and show me only MIDI files. Then it's going to show me all the MIDI files that are on my computer here. See, Da Vinci Girl has offered me a hot Irish coffee with vanilla ice cream. Thank you for that. I'll be going to Ireland next month for my first time. All right, Damien Binder asks, hey, if I accidentally created a project in a wrong directory, how do I change it so that all the new recording files get saved in the new directory? So when you do an audio recording, so when you select a file, right-click, and then you could just select Set Record Folder and just select the new audio folder that you want the files to go to. So again, once you come here, just right click, set record folder, and this would allow you to record to 2 different destinations simultaneously if you wanted to. So if you want to do a backup, you could do that as well. See, Dennis is happy that there's lots of Minnesota people. Yeah, my nephew's doing a internship in Bloomington for the summer. I have to give him a call, see how he's doing. All right, so we see Bim Bim, who asks, can you explain to me briefly, I'm a film composer, I'm using Cubase. Can you please clarify those in a brief way between Cubase and Nuendo? Thank you so much. So Nuendo is going to have all the features of Cubase plus more. So I would say if you're a film composer, we've obviously had, tons of Oscar-winning film projects done entirely in Cubase. That Cubase is fine for that. Now, where Nuendo can really excel is if you're doing audio post-production, if you're mixing all of the sounds, editing all of the dialogue, doing kind of sound design, taking your score and being able to do some more like advanced exporting functionality, being able to deal with like a CSV file for markers to get those incorporated, doing game audio, like those types of functions, ADR, lots of ADR recording and editing, those types of functions are in Nuendo. So I would say Cubase is perfect for writing music for the film. If you are mixing and editing all of the audio elements of the film, including music, dialogue, sound effects, that's where Nuendo can make a big difference in workflow. All right, Bondrude just says, hello, is there a shortcut or a tool to place all the notes side by side without increasing their width like Legato does? Like, for example, I want the notes to play one after another. Thanks. All right, so let me just... All right, so let's say if I want to come here, I think we could do it with a macro. Here, I'll just mute that, sorry. So let's say I have these notes, and if I'm reading this right, we want to move these notes all next to each other. So let's say if I'm here, okay, so let's create a macro. I think we could do this easily enough. So let's come over here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is okay, so I'm going to come over here. Let's say I have my cursor at the start of the first MIDI event here. So I'm going to not cover everything up with my window view here. Sorry about that. Okay. So I want to go to the next, basically go to, we're going to say locate the next event, which would be the end of this particular note. And then I want to select all beyond cursor. Let's see if we can select all events beyond. Okay. So let's add that command. All right, so if I'm here, and now we're going to move to cursor. Okay, let's see if we add that command. All right, so I'm going to come over here. All right, so I'm going to move my cursor here. Let's select this particular event. And then we will do a select none. Okay. All right, so we have lots of notes here. So I'm going to now come over. Let's see if we get the macros working kind of as expected. Yeah. So again, if I just move my cursor to right here, then that will move the notes. So if you want to create that, so I did transport. I'm going to move the playhead cursor right before the first note. Then it's going to locate to the next event, which would be the end of the note. We're going to select all events beyond the cursor. And if you don't, I think that's a built-in. But I'm going to make sure, just to make sure. Yeah, so that's a built-in. So select all events beyond the cursor. So that's going to select all the events. It's going to move them to the cursor position. And then we're going to select none so that we could just kind of run that macro multiple times very easily. So again, if we come here, now, so give that a try. Let me know if that's what you want to accomplish. I'd be happy to update it if necessary. See, Terry Gray is just kind of echoing the same sentiments about differences between Cubase and Nuendo. All right, so we see from FlyV says, what's the main tips you could share about the monitor button? All right, so the monitor button is always, there's a couple of preferences. So when you want to, record to an audio track, we could just come over here. So let's say we want to so we could have our monitor enabled. So if we want to record on a particular track, we could, I'll just revert this project here, just so we have the input routing. Okay, so when we want to record on a particular track, we could record enable on our track here. So let's say, okay, we want to set this to our input. Okay, so now we could record enable, but we could decouple. And often when something is record enabled, you want to monitor the actual signal that's coming in. Now there's some different monitoring options in the preferences that are helpful to be aware of. So let's say if we come over here and we go to VST, the one preference that I like to have set up is tape machine style. So if you have it manual, which is the default monitoring mode, when I go to arm a track, I would have to, if I want to hear what I'm doing, I have to physically click on a button or my control surface to just simply enable the record. So, but when I am in tape machine style, we could have a couple other settings here. So we could choose while record enabled, while record running, or tape machine style. So generally I choose tape machine style. And then that way, like if I'm doing a punch in, so let's say I'm playing, and then as soon as I go to punch in, it will just automatically turn the monitoring off, and that will be kind of linked with the record enable. So you could do it while it's running, and then also when you stop, you could, so different modes there. So experiment with some of those settings or preferences right there under VST for auto monitoring. All right. Okay, so Balsa asks, says, Greg, how would you automate a part in a song where you want to hear only the send effect for a beat or two without the dry signal and then bring it back? So let's see if we can automate the listen bus. Let me just... so let's see if we could, let's add an effect send to this. Okay, so let's see if that's automatable or not. It doesn't look like that's automatable. All right, so I guess what we could do is if we come over, so let's say we have that effect send, I'm going to, let's say export audio mixdown. Let's go to our effect send here. So I'm going to select my effect. I'm going to import this, create an audio track here. All right, and let me set the export range. Sorry about that. So now we have the reverb. So we have the reverb rendered here. So let me just undo the automation there. Let me get the right channel. So let's say it's very dry here. So I just rendered the reverb. So let's say I want to go to my volume automation. So let's say, okay, let's say we want this to kind of fade out, and we want this to kind of slowly fade in. So you could do and then let's say at this point, if you want the reverb kind of by itself, we can just select this automation node. Or you could choose to just kind of do mute automation between the two channels and kind of find the balance of that. So you could also just come over here. Let's say we want to mute. All right, so let's say we do like a mute automation kind of like this. take the loop off. So you could do some creative stuff like that, but maybe just render the, so we get a file to export, audio mix down, and then just render the reverb channel by itself, and after export choose create audio track, and then you could just kind of automate between the two different ones. Okay. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so you see from DaVinci Girl, it says I use 8 of the TC1 kits. You can jam each cam a kit, all 3 units, but again, that's not going to be like a master clock. And you see it's a Quartz timecode generator, so timecode is written automatic to an audio channel, so all is synchronized exact to 48 hours. Maybe there's just one from that exact time. So yeah, but so how are you? So are you getting the audio channel from the? Are you getting the timecode from the audio from the camera, or is it going into your Fairlight? So. All right, we see Razel Zamini joining from Denmark. Thanks for being online. We see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. All right, Flyv just says, also for some reason in the pool window, I'm not able to hear or audition sounds. So check to make sure you have the studio, that you have the control room enabled. So let's say if I go to my pool window here and I want to audition sounds. So if I go to my audio connections and I don't have the pool enabled, so I'll disable that. So it could be that now, since this, that we don't hear it. So try going to the audio connections, make sure your control room is turned on. And then that's generally like where previews are being routed out of, because that particular, when you're previewing something, it doesn't really have a home to play through, and that's what the listen bus is designed for. All right, so Captain Energy Music, wishing everyone in the U.S. had a great holiday weekend. Thanks for joining us from outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. All right, so we see Balsa asks, hi Greg, is there a way to bypass a controller lane in the MIDI editor? All right, so let's take a look. I don't think so. I think we could turn it off, but we could delete it. But let me just add a MIDI track here. All right, so let's say if we I'll just make it some modulation here. So I guess if you cut, let's say if we select all events on a lane and you cut, you could undo or paste it back in at origin. And also if you wanted to, if we go to preferences here, so there's not like a bypass that, but if we go to your preferences and we go to MIDI filter, we could choose on through to filter out specific controllers. So if you say, okay, I want to filter out my controller CC1, we could add that and that could filter it out in real time, but that may be more global and not necessarily for the that one particular event. So there isn't a way just to kind of simply bypass them other than kind of deleting it or cutting it and then being able to paste it back in. Let's see, Tim K is just saying he's got a great picture of his cat Buddy using his Godin Montreal Premiere as a pillow. He's going to learn guitar through osmosis. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma, Arizona. Hope you're well. Hope you're getting settled into your new house and studio. Memento says, by pressing the like button, you support the mental health work of all of Cubase users. All right, so Mark Rabin just says a couple things you can review for me and probably others would benefit. Normalization, when to what peak RMS. Okay, so, a lot of times, normalizing was kind of a way to kind of in early days of digital audio workstations to make things sound a little bit louder overall to get you more gain. But if you have a file and let's say the overall volume level, let me just import, is just too low. So let me just find one here. Like sometimes, in radio, people will use like really low levels of amplitude. So all right, so let's say if we're here.
So Scott Dixon joining us now, and
like I remember doing work at NPR, and their amplitude was really low. So sometimes if you get a recording, and the amplitude is, let's say it's looking, something like this. And let me just render that quickly. Okay, so let's say we have kind of a audio recording that's very low level amplitude. So someone didn't work with their gain structure very well. So as we're listening to it, we're like,
into that group of 4-time champions. It's Mario Andretti.
Now when we normalize, it's going to kind of bring everything up. So if there's a lot, and sometimes when people do a recording like this, they may not understand gain structure, so there may be noise in between. So if we wanted to normalize this to kind of bring it up, and it's always good, like a good fail-safe method, maybe like 6 dB. But we could now also just come over and say, okay, we want to normalize, and we could say, okay, I want the peak normalization, and we'll say at -6. So now we know that this is going to be, I still have kind of a healthy gain. I still have some structure, some headroom to add more processing
and so I asked you that question
if necessary. Now, if we go back, let's say if I undo that, and I'll just, So let's come over here. Let's say our direct offline processing. So I'm going to remove that. Now, when else normalizing is really handy for if you're doing something for streaming services. So let's say I have my mix and people will sit there for hours just trying to make their mix like be minus 14 loudness units for streaming or minus 23 LUFS loudness units full scale for broadcast work. So now what we could do is just come over here, we'll go to process and we can say normalize, and we could normalize based on loudness. So I could say, okay, for broadcast, I could just now take my final mix and have it at minus 23 LUFS. I could also just come here and say, okay, this is going on Spotify. I want it to be minus 14 LUFS. And we could deliver kind of a known entry, kind of a known point for loudness that or kind of can be optimized for different delivery platforms or different delivery needs by taking your final mix and normalizing it. All right. And second question was, what's the best way to comp? Do you have a shortcut for the hand tool, bounce, after, render, keep, etc.? All right, so what I do in comping, so I don't have a specific tool for comping to go to the comp tool, which is the hand. So if I'm comping, I will come over here. So let's say, okay, I want to take and I'll just take my grid off. So let's say I want to come here. All right, so let's say this is my comp and I'm happy with it. Let's say except for that comp. So what I often do at this point is I will come here, and right now I have like multiple files. I will do a duplicate track version, select these, and do an audio bounce selection. And I'll call this like a bounced comp. So now if I had to do tuning, or if I'm exporting files, I could just simply export that. And if it's like, oh, I really hated that comp, all I had to do is switch to my first track version, and all my comps are there. When I go to my bounced comp, it's all in that one particular file. So I like to kind of keep, if I was doing a lot of editing, I would maybe do a comp. I would render that as a file. I would maybe duplicate a track version and if I had to do different, and at that point, if I had to do different, like free warp, moving stuff rhythmically, I would do that, duplicate the version. Maybe if I had to do tuning, have a separate version. And then that way, if someone comes in, it's like, oh, I just really want to go back to that note. You could just come over here and just say, oh, we'll come right here. You're happy with that. It's like, oh, I want to change one thing. It's like, and within the same track, without having to duplicate processing or copy plugins, we could just come over here, say, okay, I want to, now let's duplicate this version and let's do this and say this is tuned. So we'll come right over here. We'll call this tuned. So if you need to kind of go back halfway through the settings, we can now take multiple files that were all kind of comped together. Say, okay, this is our bounced comp. Now I could do tuning as one single file as opposed to multiple files. And now I could just come over here and let's say these are all tuned. We could just go back to different stages of the editing process. right here, utilizing track versions. All right. Dennis Kern says he made a hotkey to cycle through the different monitor types like tape. So that's a good hotkey to have. All right, so Mark Rabin says his third question is DC offset. I basically ignore this, should I? So my friend Greg Lukens, who's like a wonderful mastering engineer who, when there's a problem with a big high-profile project, it'll probably end up in Greg's computer somehow. He's a blind mastering engineer. He was like the front of house guy for and designed the sound systems for Rush, kind of from 74 to 85. All their tours, just, probably one of the most amazing ears. He's a big proponent of always checking DC offset. And I've seen him, I remember being in a room with him, and he got I think it was a new Ed Cherney project that Ed mixed, and it was just came out and everyone was just raving about the project, and he's like, oh, it sounds so much better if you just did a DC offset removal. And Ed's like, oh, I can't believe I forgot to check that. So I think it's always worth checking DC offset, and that could and you may notice it when you have an audio file whose amplitude seems skewed in one direction or the other. But for a lot of mastering engineers, DC offset is something that they will always check. So I think it's always worth checking. Okay, Michael Teams has granted my family and I 1 gallon of Kahlua mocha ice cream. All right, Bim Bim just asked, thanks for answering the previous question, how can I draw tempo automation gradually slow down? For example, in 2 bars, I went from tempo 100 to 80 in just 1 stroke by automation. Thanks a lot. All right, so if we want it to come over here, let's add a tempo track. Okay, so we add our tempo track and kind of off to the right here, and you may have to, it's kind of hidden. If you kind of make this a little larger, there's 2 different tempo modes. So there's step, where you can say, okay, I'm at 129, and then over 2 bars I want to go down to here. So we see that that's going to not go gradually but just step down. If we switch this to ramp, we can say, okay, I want to go from 100 beats a minute to 80 beats a minute over 2 measures, and now that will just ramp down. So once you have tempo events and they're selected, we could switch between step and ramp right here. But if you want to just see it, just extend this over to the right just a little bit, and you could have it set for ramp or step right there. So just set that to ramp, and then you could kind of automate your tempo changes with just 2 values in between. All right, so I'm just saying from Cornell, just as maybe this is in conjunction with another question. Maybe you could specify a little bit, but it just says, what if you set the effect send as pre-fader? All right. All right, just make sure I didn't miss any questions here real quick before we move into. Okay, reading through comments here. Okay, so we just see, it says, one question has been bothering me for a long time. How do I input lyrics not as sheet music, not as markers? So if you want to import if you want to have lyrics, if you want them in the timeline to be kind of synchronized to different areas, you could have it as timeline, but then I'll show you an example of that. Okay, so let's say we have so you could have lyrics that are kind of, so I have these currently set as, if I go to my project, into the project notepad. Now these aren't necessarily synchronized, but they're stored within the project. So I could just see the lyrics there. Now I like to have this as a marker track. So let's say if I come here, I could just open up, let's say, I just thought I had it as, thought I had it as a marker track in there, but, and that way you could navigate to just try one, see if I can find a project again with the marker, with the text. Guess I don't have it in here either, but so I like to just be able to go to like a lyrics marker track. Let me just see if I'll try one more time. Now I guess I don't have it, but so, and then I could just, as I go to drop markers in, so I could come over here, let's just add a marker track. So we'll show you how you could do this here. So I'll just put in kind of like cycle markers, and we'll call it lyrics. So I'll just hold down my shift key, I think my alt key. So now I could just come over here. So I'll hold down my Shift and Control or Command key and say, so now when I go to like my marker track, I could just come over here, because a lot of times the singer's like, oh, I just want to do this line. You know, it's like, oh, we played our records in tonight. Can you do there? And then you can navigate directly to there. So if you don't want it as the lyrics as markers or in the score, you can always just put it directly into the project notepad. So if you go to project here and go to your notepad, you could just have it there. So you could copy from there and make markers so you can navigate as you're doing vocals pretty easily. All right, so we see Balsa just ask, hi Greg, can you show the Enharmonic shift tool in the MIDI editor? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say we have chord track, so we're in the key of, I think, A flat in this particular song. So now when I come over here, we can see that we have G sharp threes that are indicated instead of A flats. So if we want to make our G sharp threes kind of follow the chords that have been defined from the chord track, if we go to our preferences, and we will come over here to event display, we'll say chords and pitches, and we'll say Enharmonics from chord track. We'll check that, we'll hit apply, hit OK, and now we can see that as we come over, that that's now going to be A flat 3 as opposed to G sharp 3. So, but you need to have kind of the chords in the chord track, and then once you have those, then the enharmonic spellings can match. So okay, reading through comments. Okay, just reading through. All right, Max Auto 44E says, sup host, sup fellow Cubase users, host, do you do one-on-one sessions? I occasionally do one-on-one sessions, so you can reach out through your email address, maybe. See, Mark Rabin just says nice bass work, so could have been me. So thank you. All right, Avli Music Productions asks, good to see you on. What is the difference between the Q mixes on a control room and the phones mixes Q1, Q2, etc.? All right, so we could think of the control room. So let's say you're in a scenario where, there's an engineer and an assistant. So maybe the assistant is doing tuning and editing, and the engineer is kind of more big picture things. All right, so we could have kind of separate monitoring paths for our headphones. So we come over here and we go to our audio connections. So we can say our headphones are being routed out through outputs 3 and 4, our speakers, our monitors are being routed out through outputs 1 and 2. So let's say you're tracking. Now, these are two separate monitoring paths. So if someone needs to do vocal tuning in the headphones, someone needs to do vocal tuning in the headphones without maybe the artist realizing what's going on. At that point, the assistant could be doing work and just kind of switch off the headphones, switch off this, and they could be doing different editing tasks while maybe the producer's getting a cup of coffee. And then it's like, okay, we could do this. So let's say someone is complaining that they're not hearing themselves in the headphones. So from the monitoring path, so let's say from the speakers, which we'll call main. So we'll think of main as speakers. We could listen in the speakers to the different headphone cue mixes right here. So as we want to go to our phones mix here, let's say someone's complaining that they're not hearing themselves well in the headphone mix. The assistant could just put the headphones on and listen to the different headphone mixes without interrupting the output for the main tracking session. So this way, headphones could be listening to different cue mixes, and the speakers could be listening to the main mix, and they could be kind of resolved and kind of tweak different headphone mixes as needed. So it could be a kind of a separate monitoring path. So think of main as the speakers, phones. They're going out of headphones, but those headphones are in the control room. Okay. Okay. Daniel Bader asks, hello, Greg. I'm having a problem when comping multi-track drums in the folder and phase synced tracks. When I open one track to choose the lanes, the other tracks won't follow the editing. Any idea? Yeah, so let's take a look. I think I can show you the trick with this. Okay, so let's say we're doing our multi-track drum editing here. We'll do our comping. Okay, so we'll come over and all right, so we'll say we'll do a couple, just make this shorter here for time's sake. All right. Okay, so say we have take one, take two. Okay, so we got a couple of different passes here, and we want to start comping our drums. So I'm going to put these into a folder. So we'll move these to a folder. And then we'll say we're going to activate the phase coherent audio warp and do our group editing. All right, so now we have our different lanes. All right, so if I come over here and, so let's say do a comp here. All right, and we open up the different lanes. Those aren't reflected. So the trick, I believe, it's to see if it still works. If you open the lanes on all of the tracks here, so now that they're all visible, I could say let's do and that will automatically do that comp across all the lanes. So you may have to open the lanes for each of the tracks for those to carry over when doing kind of multi-track drum editing with the phase coherence on. So now if I make a change here, we can see that that change is now automatically applied to all of the tracks in the group editing. All right, Balsa asks, hi Greg, is it possible to free warp audio events in a project window without opening the audio editor? Sure. So this came in like 13. Okay, so what we want to do is just select the warp tool, and we want to come here to free warp. And you may have to kind of zoom in a little bit. So, and if I want to drop kind of my free warp markers here, I could drop these in. All right, so now you want to probably make sure that you have a warp marker before and after. Now, if you're not zoomed in enough, like at a certain point, it's just going to be like all yellow. You know, so if you go like this, if you were to zoom out, you know, it could just be entirely yellow based on the warp markers. So the warp markers may not be visible. So again, go to the warp tool, select free warp, make sure you zoom in, and then you could just kind of drop. And now where you see kind of the white line appear here, we can just warp and move those events. Now, if we don't have a warp marker after, if I move this event, we'll see that this is going to move the other events. But if there's a warp marker placed right here, now I can move that event, and that warp marker will stay in place. So yeah, you can do it directly on the project window without having to go into the sample editor. Okay, reading through comments. See a great comment from Tim K. It says, we all deeply love and appreciate Jazzy for his wealth of knowledge and experience and his troll management prowess. So I think, yeah, we have a pretty good, well-behaved group that we don't have many trolls popping in like we used to have in the past. All right, Alexander asks, I believe it's Alexander, question, what is the best tips to working with Vari Audio? I mean, how to keep the original record of voice and how to create a Vox track for working with Vari Audio. Any other tips, please? Okay, so let's say in this scenario, so again, and this be pretty similar to what I was just kind of talking about previously, which we may have showed before, but let me just. All right, so a lot of times vocal recordings will be many small little sections that are set up, you know, or just small punch-ins, punch-outs. So that's pretty typical in a vocal recording session. So when we want to do Vari Audio, if we go to Vari Audio, we could say, okay, we're here, and now I want to do Vari Audio. If I come here, I would have to do my edit Vari Audio, and now, so we could do that for every single part. But again, this is where I would use kind of track versions as an editing method. So we'll say, let's duplicate the version. And now I want to deal with, instead of 8 or 10 or 100 different audio files, I want to be able to come over here and let's go to audio to bounce selection. And now I could go back to all of my edits if I need to fix a crossfade or an amplitude or adjust the volume clip gain. And now when I come over here, I could just double click and I could do very audio all on one particular file. So I don't have to kind of open up the very audio editor across different files and do its analysis. I could just go to this particular track version, and as we double click, we could go right into the very audio editor. So that way the original file will always be there. Someone's like, oh, you didn't need to tune my voice. You go, oh, let's listen to it. Oh, maybe we did. Maybe we didn't. But you could always go back and go to the alternate track version. See, Jazz Dude says he just some discussion of oscilloscopes and that he has a 2-channel 30 megahertz oscilloscope from the late 70s with CRT. So yeah, my dad had one of those. He was an electrical engineer. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Asimov asks, hey, do I need an upgraded version of Cubase to be able to do some of these methods? I'm always going to be running the latest version. But a lot of times some of these functions have been in the program for years and years. And if you didn't go looking for them or if you didn't find them, you may not be aware that they're actually present and in the program. So you could definitely try to use these functions in a previous earlier version. Some of it, but I will always be running to, I'll always be running the latest version. But a lot of the functionalities that we do in live streams can go back several versions. Okay, so we see from Ski Jump Toes. Hi, Greg. I'm trying to do more, to use more of the stock plugins in Cubase. Is it possible to do a rundown of what various compressors are most suited for? So I always will tell people just kind of play around. I would say if you want a really simple, effective, clean, transparent compressor, probably the built-in compressor works really well. So if you want more flavor, so let's say if you want something more analog in nature, there's the black valve. So this may be kind of like a UA 610, maybe. So a lot of people like this compressor quite a bit. More vintage. If you wanted to come over here, you could get into the tube compressor or the vintage compressor. So one will have a little bit more distortion, so these would often be used on vocals. So let's say, so if we want to go to the vintage compressor, so you get an idea visually of what these are kind of going after. If you want a very specific compressor for vocals, like the Vox Comp was introduced in version 14, so just a very transparent compressor. We can think of these three as being more kind of character generating. Sometimes you want that for a specific sound, like or glue, and other ones will be more kind of clean and transparent and just kind of get the job done without altering radically the sound. All right, Daniel Bader just says, hello again, Greg. How to export remote control scripts or save them to use in other computers? Okay, let me get mine hooked up here real quick. I'll show you. Okay, so let's go to our MIDI remote. So once we'll come over here, we'll go to, let's say, our last MIDI controller. So we'll come over here and we'll see scripts. So you see this little settings cogwheel here. We can now see our scripts. And then at this point, so let's say if we have this set up, we could just simply export our script. So now when we come to scripts, we could export the script right here and choose the destination where it's going to be. And then when we want to import a remote control script, we could just click right here, and just from the same area, there's an import tab. So we could just simply choose to import the script right from there. All right, let me jump to some of the questions that were mailed in advance. Sorry, let me just get to the... All right, so I think this was Balsa's question from last week, and I think I may have found... Let me just mute my monitoring computer. Like a quick way to take track versions to audio tracks. So I think I found a quicker way than what I showed on Friday's live stream. So let me open up project. Okay, so when we look at this, we could say, okay, we have lots of lanes, or let's say we have lots of track versions here, so we could switch between different track versions like so. Okay, and we want to take our track versions and convert them into lanes. So I think probably a faster way than I showed on Friday was if we go to our track versions and we convert the track versions, we say create lanes from versions. Okay, so now we've created these lanes, and now what I want to do is to select these particular lanes, and we'll right click in the lanes and say we're going to create tracks from lanes. And now it's kind of a two-step process without having to manually copy. So again, to do that, come over to track versions. We want to take track versions to audio tracks, kind of a two-step process. Project menu, track versions. And we'll say convert, create lanes from versions. We'll have those lanes open. We could select these, right click in here, and just choose create tracks from lanes. They will be muted by default, most of them except the one. And now you could just grab the mute tool and lasso unmute other tracks. So it should be a little faster than the method I showed the other day. All right. All right, so we had a question, how to have an audio file loop without copying the file onto the project window. Okay, so I know people have been wanting, I was playing around with this, see if I come up with a better kind of workflow. So let's say I have an audio loop here. Okay, so we'll just take kind of a generic drum loop, and let's say I have a song here which has varying tempos. Okay, so as I come over here, let's say, all right, so what I want to do, I was kind of playing around with this a little bit to see if there's a better method of doing this. It was a little easier for some people who didn't want to physically copy the events onto the project window. So I opened up just a blank instance of Groove Agent. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that rock drum loop here and I'm going to drag it onto an instrument pad. All right, so let me just come here. I'll just cut the kit here. So now I'm going to drag this onto an instrument pad. Then I'm going to go from the Edit tab to Slice. And we'll say we're going to slice the audio. Now, when we do this, this is automatically going to create a pattern event, and that pattern event will be selected. I'm going to click on Follow Transport. So if I play, this will now play along. So now at this point, so I could take this Groove Agent track here. And this is now speeding up and slowing down because it's just playing this pattern, which is following the tempo. So if I take the Groove Agent track here, and let's say I just want to mute. So now that loop, without having to be copied into the project window, will just kind of play in sync and automatically follow the tempo of the project, even with varying tempo. So again, drag the loop to a Groove Agent pad, create slices, and then have it follow transport. And when you hit play, it's automatically going to follow your transport for you and will synchronize. So that's another method without having, in case copying the file and dragging it over is too much effort. All right, our next question. Dear Greg, is it anyhow possible that if I drag a VST effect plugin to the track list in the project that it's placed where I dragged it to? When I try this, it always goes down into the effects folder. Okay. So let's say if we are, let's open up some tracks here. Okay, so if we have different files, so if I go to add a VST track, or VST effects track, so if I come here and add an effects track, there's two settings here. So if we add an effects track, we get this option to create inside the folder, and that folder is the effects channel, or we could create it outside of the folder. And we could think of, so if we do outside of the folder, think of that as being as below selected track. So when I go to add my reference here, it's going to automatically add that effect track below the track that was selected. Now, if we're dragging, all I would have to do is let's go to our media bay here. We'll go home. Let's go to our VST effects. So if I wanted to filter between the tracks, I would just drag it over. If I wanted this filter as an insert on the track, we see the green line in the middle. That will add it as an insert. If I wanted to add this as an effects channel track, I would just move it to between the tracks where we see the green line. And now I could just simply add my effects track anywhere that I want. If I double click, I think it automatically goes into an effects track. So let's say if I double click here and we go to load up a preset, then we could do that. But you could drag very easily, just taking the particular effect and say, okay, I want to come here. Let's go to, let's say, presets. So now I could drag a preset over right there, or drag a preset and place it directly on a track as an insert. So a couple of ways to do that. Okay, so we have another question. I think this is follow up to a question on last week's live stream. It says, hi Greg, okay, I have one for you. In my scenario, I have two VST instrument tracks with multiple lanes each. I have comped the tracks so that I now have the parts I want remaining. The rest is muted. What I want to create is a one key shortcut or MIDI logical editor that will take those two tracks, or more if necessary, remove the unused muted lane parts, bounce to remaining active MIDI, basically leaving only what is necessary now on each track. Can you find a way to do that? All right, so let's say if I come over here, let me just close this up. So I think I found a way to do it on a single track at a time. So let's say I have these different parts that are comped here. And I'll make these larger so you can see. And let me just... Okay, so what we want to do is I'm going to select one track at a time here. So let's say, okay, I want to do this retrolog track. So I did it with a project logical editor, and I'll continue to see if I could get like multiple tracks at once. But let's go to the setup here. So what I did is I said we want to delete media that's equal to MIDI, and a property is set to is muted. And then what I want to do is go to the, I think this might be, I might switch this to show lanes. Let me just see if it works. I mean, I have to switch one function. And then we just said select all on tracks. And I think this might be show lanes instead here. Okay, so I'm going to select this. So basically, if we do if this works as expected, now all right, let me make sure I did the right one. All right, so I'll try on this track here. All right, let me just remove that. All right. Yeah. All right, so if we do this, so we want to, media type is equal to MIDI, and the property is set to is muted. And then after that, we're going to select all on the tracks, and then we're going to do MIDI bounce. So if we did this correct, let's say this is our event here. So we have all these muted parts we want to get rid of, and I'll just try it on. So we can see now that the MIDI has been merged on all of those particular tracks here. So like this one, so we come over, let's just say we want to take this particular track. So we do this, And now we can see that that has automatically been merged into one single event and got rid of the rest. I'll continue to kind of play around with it to see if I can get it working for multiple tracks, but it looks like I could do it for one track at a time and kind of clean up all of the MIDI right here. So let's say if I, so give that a try. Let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see question. I'm doing a PhD on immersive audio. Would like to talk to some of the team, work staff that deal with immersive aspects. Is there any way to get in contact? So probably, if you have like specific questions, kind of for research purposes, I'd be happy to kind of pass them along. It's probably not fair of me to give out any of the engineering team's contact information, but I could kind of pass it along and see if they're amenable to kind of sharing secrets or sharing tips and tricks. Sometimes those are like trade secrets as well, depending on what questions, but you could always feel free to send your questions and I could pass them along and see if someone is up for responding and to your questions. Okay, next question. Hi, Greg. What is the best way to import loops from the Steinberg sound collection and adapt them to the chords of our project? So when we do our chord track, so it's not going to follow the chords. The only thing it's going to do is to take a monophonic audio and take that monophonic audio and convert it and have that follow the chords. So if I come over here and we have a chord track, I could go to the chords for something like a bass or vocal or a saxophone solo, and we could have these follow the chord track. So if I come, let's add a chord track here. So let's say I want to go A to G. So now if we have a chord progression here, I could tell a monophonic part to follow the chord tracks. And if we're going to do bass, we could choose something like root notes, but it's not going to take like a piano audio file and convert that to the chord track. So the technology isn't quite there for that. Okay, so we see another question. What is the best way to play a small sample as an instrument from an instrument loop, no drums? So, anything, I think probably a sampler track. So let's come over and we'll just jump home. We'll go to loops and samples. All right, so let's say I want to do that, and I want to make a, we'll create a sampler track from that. And now when I come over here, we could just choose to and if we want to create kind of a loop of that, we could set kind of our start and end points for the loop. So say, okay, the sample doesn't start right at the beginning, so we want to start right there. And let's say if we wanted it to loop, we could just kind of come right over here and we could choose different loop points. So if you want to choose just like a small area to loop, so you could kind of go in and tweak just like a small section. for looping, so you could do it just like that. Okay, so we see another question. What are the differences between Spectral Synth, Sampler Track, and Pad Shop? Which one has the better capabilities? According to Dom Segalis, Spectral Synth is so good that one can create an instrument from a single sample. While a Sampler Track, you have to import a new sample for all 3 notes. For example, I want to create an instrument for my real pan flute. What is the best way to do this in Spectral Synth? So I think that they're going to be quite different tasks. So let's say if we want to come over here, let's see if I can get this to cooperate. If I don't come back in a second, I'll just exit out and restart. All right, let me just restart. So I think with kind of any of these are kind of fine for that. Let me just check my audio connections. All right, so let's say I just have kind of a particular sound. So I will come over here. And let's say we have this as our sample. So we'll just... So let's say we'll have... Let me just... All right, so if we go into the sampler track and we want to be kind of creative with it, so the sampler track is going to be great at, I could just drag a file right into a particular sample track. So let's say I want to take the sampler track here. I'll just create a new one. So I could just drag that file right into the sampler track. So now I could, come right over here and just start kind of playing along. So if I really quickly want to, and then be able to run it through different filters as well, so super fast. Now, if we want to have more control, we could drop it into extreme. Extreme is a monophonic sound. So, and usually what's a great way to start is just load up a preset and then just kind of drop the sample in. And now kind of as we play like the spectral synth here, we can just kind of come over and make sure I have this. But I can't play chords in this. So you could get like an outrageous like time stretching quality. And if you wanted to do more kind of chord-based instruments, we could use Pad Shop. And Pad Shop will kind of, if we were to think of glass as being like a bunch of little pieces of sand that are kind of congealed together, and we wanted to do synthesis on at the sand or granular level, that's what Pad Shop is really good for. So again, just kind of drop the sample right in, and now we're able to kind of play chords. So you get to see how we could get kind of different capabilities and different functions, kind of doing sound design work straight from within the provided tools in Cubase. Okay, next question. Hello, Greg. Let's say I have two versions of a Riff Fusion remix of a song that we want to import into a project for inspiration while we edit the song. The remixes are not in sync with the tempo, so we need to adjust both to the project tempo. How do we do that? Do we need to flatten one file first and then save it as a new file because you can't have multiple tempo tracks in a project at the same time? And when flattening the second file, you have to delete the tempo track of the first one, which would result in losing everything. The same applies to if you want to align, for example, 5 song stems from spectral layers to the project tempo at the same time. So what a lot of people miss is, let's say we have our tempo track here. So let's say if we are working with, it's true you can only have one tempo track at a time, but what you can do is, let's say we have a tempo track here, is utilize track versions. So we could just come right over here. Let's do a new track version. So this could be your project, and we could now just kind of come right over here. And if you wanted to go back to the original tempo, you could have multiple tempo tracks in the form of track versions. So I would try that, and I think that would do the trick for you. And you could so in that way, you don't have to worry about the consequences of changing your tempo. All right, let me go back to our live questions. Thanks for sending questions in. Again, you could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, let me find my spot. Tim Cage says, great comment. So it says, and the same goes in varying degrees just about everyone else here. To be honest, it's a helpful, altruistic community I'm proud to be able to participate in. And there's virtual ice cream. All right, so Meridian Audio Studio just says, how do I input lyrics? So when we come over, so there's a couple different ways. One is if we have like a MIDI event. So let me just go with different project here real quick. Yeah. Okay, so if you want to insert lyrics in kind of the score editor, one way is, let's say if we're here, we go to our score editor, and I'll just put the key in here. Just Okay, so now if we want to come over, we can go to the text, and then we could just kind of put your lyrics in. So you could put it in like that. So that way it could be printed out and could be exported as a MIDI file if needed. You could also just come over and, like, let's say in this example, I have in my project notepad, I could just say, I'm going to take the first line. So let's say I have the lyrics that are entered. Let's see if my mouse is. I have to plug my mouse in. Give me a second. Sorry about that. Hate when my mouse dies in the middle of a live stream. All right. All right, so let's say I just wanted to come here. I could just say, okay, here's, like, I just have these copied, so I'm going to come here. Let's say we listen to. All right, so I want to put a new marker track. And we'll call this lyrics. So again, we'll just say, I think I may have copied. So let me just copy that. Okay, so we have like the first line, copy, hold down to control and shift and say, okay, we want to paste. We want to come here. Let's hold down. I'll take the next line. So I'm going to select our lyrics here. You could type them in as well. So copy, control, paste. Copy. Let's put it in. So now we could just kind of navigate directly to our different lines. Once we see our lyrics, we'll open up, let's say, our lyric. And now we could just say, okay, when I say I turned it up, you wouldn't mind, I want to do that line again, you could just navigate right to there, and that will move the song position directly to that spot where that lyric is. Okay, FlyV asks, what is the reference level function in the control room? Okay, so the reference level will just allow you to have kind of a known monitoring point. So when we come over here, we could say, and Phil Ramon was, I remember being in a session with him, this is always great because he would just come over at the very start of the session every time, and we'd say, you know, this is as loud as we're going to get. We all agree that we're not getting louder than this. And he would put a piece of tape down by the control room knob, because as sessions would go on, you know, over and over again, it's the tendency is that you tend to lie to yourself. You crank it up, it starts sounding good, but it's not really. It's just your ears are getting tired. So what the reference level is, you could have a known monitoring volume. If you're doing like post-production, it's often 85 dB because that's what they mixed Star Wars at, and that became kind of the typical the typical setting for that. But now what you could do is just come over here and go immediately back to a known monitoring point. So if that's where you always want to make sure that it sounds good at this level, that way if you're kind of working, say this is as loud as I get is my known reference point, you could just set and store a value right here at your monitoring volume that you want. All right, wonderful to see Recyclop checking in from Finland. All right, Recyclop asks, when recording samples, I usually record all hits on a single take. What's the simplest way to split the samples to separate WAV files? Okay, so let's say I'm here. Okay. Okay, let me just turn off automation here. Let's do it in a new project, doesn't. All right, so I'm gonna take my audio track and let's say I just want to do like kind of a sampling session. So we're gonna say we're gonna set Groove Agent as our input, and now as we record, all right, so let's say I now have those as separate files. So now what we could do is if we just go to the audio menu here and we go to advanced, we'll see detect silence. So we could adjust our threshold down just a little bit here and we will process, and now each of the samples there has automatically been trimmed nicely for you. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Recyclop. All right, Michael Teams is back and says, sorry, one of the bovines made a jailbreak. She is back with the herd now. So that is so Texas. It's brilliant. Anyway, we're glad that your herd is under control. Okay. Seeing Mark Rabin sharing advice on what to do if cows are chasing you. If you do feel threatened, just make sure you go to the nearest safe exit, even if that means going back the way you came. Must go faster. This is really a last resort. All right, Donnie asks, in Cubase 14's detached key editor inspector, what is the command to toggle between showing only the top lane square icon and showing all lanes check mark on the selected instrument track? So I don't think that there is a keyboard shortcut for that, but let's take a look. Okay, so if we come here, yeah, so here we can see that we're going to have the other parts here. So I don't think that there's a keyboard shortcut for that, but let's take a look. All right, let me look at key commands. Okay, so let's see if maybe this. Yeah, I don't know. Just looking at key commands one more time. Let's try this one. Doesn't look like that works either. So I don't think that there's a key command for that. I'll take a look if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. And we see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford. Seeing good advice for animal interactions. So Mark Raven has a nice comment. Says, yeah, I really can't say how much this channel helps, and the gratitude I feel for it, the people, the culture, and accepting nature of it all. It's refreshing and needed. Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful community. Thanks everyone for being involved. All right, Michael Team says, howdy, Greg. I'm going to try using the drum pattern editor. Can you demo it, please? Yeah, let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to add a drum track, and this will make it a pattern event here. Let's just load up a quick sound. We're almost at summer, so it sounds like a good preset. All right, so now I have the drum machine as the sounds, and we could utilize the editor, and we could use this editor with other devices as well. But let's come over, and we can see our grid. We could have this grid be a different resolution. So if we want it to be all 8th notes, we could do 16th notes. We could have 16 steps. We could have 32 steps, 33 steps if you want. So let's say I want to come over, let's do 16 steps to start with here. So I just want to all right, so if I want to adjust like the velocity, now we could also kind of do different ways of automatically randomizing. So if I want to put some congas in, I could just kind of roll the dice here. And let's say I want my congas low. Let's randomize the dice here. And let's come over here to the hi-hat, and then let's say I just want like kind of straight 16th note hi-hats. We could, instead of it being random, we could set it to be Euclidean. So this way we could just kind of add in and if we wanted to switch this to be 32nd notes, and if I wanted this to kind of scale up, and if I want to just kind of come over and let's add in a couple, like let's throw in like a clap here. And I want to put in repeats on the clap. Now let's say I want to take those claps and I want their pitches to change. I could go back to the drum machine instrument and we'll select our claps. And I want to right click and we could adjust our pitch here. So let's just come over. And we could also add reverb. So we could add different effects here on it that we want. And if we wanted to add different filters, so now we're able to kind of come over and let's just say, let's go to our kick drum here and say, I want to right click and we'll say the pattern editor. So I'll come over here to the pattern editor for our kick. And let's say we'll do 4 on the floor. And then we'll see my pitch density, my pitch control. So I can say, let's just take this. So, or if we want to change, so we could automate different parameters right there. Now, if we wanted some of the patterns to play back, if we want some of the patterns here to play backwards. So now the hi-hats are playing backwards. So say the kicks, I want to go forward and then backward. And then, but you could also just kind of come over here if you want to come over with like really interesting things, just like we want to do a new pattern, I could come here and I could just have a random pattern created. So say I like that. Let's just randomize a different pattern. And then we could just switch back and forth between our different patterns. When we want these in our project window, we could drag. This sequencer is disabled, and now as we play, we can say, I want to switch that to, let's say we'll start off in pattern 1. I want this to be pattern 2, pattern 3, back to pattern 1. So, and if we want to convert all these from a pattern event, we can now just convert all those directly into MIDI right there. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay. All right, reading through comments here. All right, wonderful. See Gareth on. All right, so I see Pablo has side A done. So yeah, if you have those files, that'd be great for me to see what he did. Okay, so we see Recyclop. Is there any way to convert events into files? So let's say if we have these events here, and let me just do a quick render in place. So I'm not sure if they're audio, but if we come over, let me just get to my render settings. We'll do these as separate events. Okay, so now we can, let's say if we have our events here on our project window, and we want all of these to be, let's say these are kind of chopped up. All you'd have to do is if you select the particular events, if you want to turn those into kind of separate audio files, let's say you just kind of cut out different parts, you could go to export selected events, and we could export them as separate events, block events, and you could just choose what level of processing you want and what level where you want files. If you need to add a different naming convention, you could do that as well. So again, just come over here, file, to export selected events. So Jazz Dude says that him and I have something in common. We're both bass players. Is that the secret? So it's always interesting. There's a lot of bass players that are kind of producers. I think it gives them kind of a unique perspective because musically you're kind of tying in a lot of the different elements and you're kind of aware of listening to people. I always viewed my role as a bass player as make other people sound good. So there's always kind of interesting mindset of being a bass player. I think is helpful. All right, so we see Michael Pierce on. Thanks for joining us. All right. Okay, so we see from Daniel Bader, says, hello again, Greg. In a MIDI remote editor creating a script, is there any way to copy and paste multiple buttons or faders that I have already created? So if we have, let's say we go to your MIDI remote here. So what you can do is if you come over here, let's say we go to a new mapping assistant. So I think if we come over here, we could just choose, say if we go to settings. So if you go to settings, you could duplicate a particular, so now we could, take those, if we have a lot of settings that we want to remain the same, just if you click on a little, so once we go to the MIDI, through the MIDI remote mapping assistant, which you get access right here, go to the settings here, click on duplicate, and then a lot of those settings you could just preserve and then change the ones that you want. So if it's faster to do it that way, you could duplicate and keep a lot of the settings the same and just kind of modify as needed. Michael Teams saying everyone should join the Cubase Nation Discord. It's a great resource of information. Okay, so we see Gareth just saying, I couldn't get the pattern editor to load. Groove Agent named kit parts. My IQ of 4.5 lent me down. All right, so let's say we want to come over. I'm going to add an instrument track. Let's go to Groove Agent SE, and I want to, instead of a MIDI part, I'm going to create a pattern event. So I'm going to load up a particular kit here. Okay, so, and sometimes you may have to kind of double click and then erase if you don't see like the pattern editor come up. So now we take this Groove Agent. What I could do now is say, create drum map from the instrument. And now we see that the drum map kind of started with like 6 sounds, and we click on the plus sign. We can now just simply add those in and see the names automatically derived from the drum map or the sounds that are in Groove Agent. So once you have it set up for Groove Agent, if you don't see the pattern event show up, double click on the project window, then erase. I found I have to do that sometimes. And then go to create drum map from instrument, click on the plus sign, and then the drum name should populate. Radar the band says, is it Friday yet? So we see Gareth just asked, are those presets the same as a Groove Agent one? So the Groove Agent presets aren't, and the Groove Agent presets are separate and different from the drum machine. Gareth just saying you can use them to buy things in Roblox, to Michael Pierce. Don't tell my son. He's a Roblox fan. Okay. Are you reading through comments? Gareth is just saying bassists are always the fastest setup. Then they can look impatiently as a guitarist as he adjusts the knobs in his 15 pedals. The best part is after the gig, I always, with the last band I was in, everyone's just like, oh, that was a lot of fun. That was great. Oh, fun. And I, while they're still kind of talking about the gig, I was already loading out into my car. So I could do everything in one trip. So they always hated me for that. All right, so you see Gareth says he's trying it now. So we'll see if that works for him. I think we are out of questions. So once again, next Tuesday, I'm going to be doing a trip with my son and his school. So let me know if you prefer doing the... let me just clear my throat. Let me know if you want to do the hangout on... if you want to do the hangout on Monday or Wednesday instead of Tuesday. So... and we could move it for next week so we get 2 hangouts in, because I'll be on vacation and missed 2 hangouts in June. So we'll try to get as many in as we can. All right. So you see Michael Pierce just says bass plus sans amp equals done, Shirley. I like the little Ampeg SCR-DI. That's kind of my favorite one. I use it as my in-ear headphone amp, and just great. All right. Okay, so Jazz Dude saying, Beth, both days are okay for me. All right, so maybe we'll take a quick survey. So everyone think about it. We'll ask on Friday for the live stream. And also Friday will be our Zoom meetup. And if you're kind of new, what we do the end of the month, the last live stream, is we usually have kind of a Zoom meetup where everyone can meet and talk. So I know we have new people that are joining all the time. It's always wonderful to meet people and put a face and get to meet people that are on the live streams. So, all right, we'll see if there's any more questions. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. I hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And we'll see if there's any... See, Michael Pierce says he's going to try to make the Zoom. Friday is mad at the moment. We always like when Michael Pierce is on. All right, it would be great to see Dennis Curran on. All right, so with that, I think we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Talk to you soon. Bye.